Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Bavarian and this is of course Victoria 3's Dev Diary number 19. Today we have relations and infamy and interests. All those of these three topics are in this Dev Diary, and there are two things that I would like to point out before we jump into this. The first one is, please pay attention when it comes to this Dev Diary. Please think about it. Please leave a comment in the comment section and leave a comment in the Paradox forum thread. The link is of course in the description if you feel so inclined, because all of these mechanics that you're going to be seeing here today are absolutely pivotal for everything. Basically everything going on in diplomacy in this game. Why is that so? Well, these are all the fundamental building pieces of diplomacy. Everything that you do in diplomacy will be sort of circling around these, will have an impact on them and vice versa. So definitely make sure that you like this system, and if you do like it then say so. If you don't like it then say so as well. Very, very important. Victoria 3 is a system, or rather is a game that has seen many changes based on user feedback. And I think it is very important that that continues, because that will make the best game for all of us. Now, number two of what I want to mention is that Infamy is here. Yes, Infamy is here, and I didn't think so myself. Originally, of course, we were talking about Threat. We sort of hypothesized on this channel as well, at least to a very limited degree, as limited as we could with what we knew about it. And Threat didn't make it into the game. They also approached this in the Dev Diary, but I do want to point that out. We are looking now at a bit of a hybrid system where Infamy comes in from Victoria 2, is significantly changed, significantly altered, and then does something similar to what, Infamy in Victoria 2 did. Keep an eye out on that, primarily because it is now a new mechanic. So, let's jump into this. Let's, inspect what Victoria 3 does when it comes to diplomacy. This one is going to be a little broad, as we want to go through the fundamental mechanics of diplomacy before moving on. Right, let's start with relations. This is a value on a scale between -100 and +100 that determines the overall diplomatic standing between two countries, similar to, of course, how other games that do that as well. The key difference between relations here and in those games is that in Victoria 3, relations are bilateral, meaning that while in your Europa Universalis, France can have a relation of -100 with Prussia, while Prussia has a relation of +100. In Victoria 3, these two countries will always have the same relation score towards each other. So, this is different from all the other games, except from the Victoria series. Remind me, maybe EU3 does it, maybe, I don't think Hearts of Iron does it. I don't want to bet on that though. Hearts of Iron 2 and Hearts of Iron 3 may have had this as well, but in Victoria 2 you also had a relation that said, hey, +200, and that exists between these countries bilaterally. So this isn't necessarily new, but it is a good step in my opinion that they kept this, and there are two reasons for this. Let's just jump in what they have to say. I want to give that to you as well. There's a few reasons for this change, such as making it more clear exactly where two countries stand with each other, but the most important one is that we want relations to be a mechanic with significance and mechanical effects, not just for AI countries, but also for the player, and even in multiplayer. Now, why is this relevant? Fundamentally, when you play these games, when you play EU4, when you play CK3, in CK3 you may have a very positive opinion of somebody else, and that person may have a very negative opinion of you. What this leads to is ultimately that the AI looks at you and says, oh, this guy likes me, they're not gonna attack me, right? And then they do. Because you're the player. You are completely unpredictable in these games, because your opinion doesn't actually mean anything. In Stellaris, if I'm not mistaken here, please correct me if I am, but in Stellaris, for example, hey, if you are playing in multiplayer, it just reads, yeah, we don't know how the player will react to this, because it's a player. We have no idea what's going on. And one of the biggest difficulties here is that the AI can't really tell what the player is going to do based on the opinion, because, again, opinion doesn't mean anything. Now, AI versus AI, opinion means everything. What your opinion of somebody is makes it so that that AI will say, okay, you are a threat and you are not a threat, and I'm a threat to you, for example, right? In Victoria 3, this will be different, because in Victoria 3, you as the player will also be bound by how this bilateral relationship is actually designed, and I think this is a good step. I think this is very, very positive. I do want to point out that it appears that opinion and relations are now one and the same. They have been merged, they have been altered, but they are no longer separate. If you didn't play Victoria 2, then this might not say anything for you, but basically in Victoria 2, you had something called opinions, and opinions gave you statuses such as cordial, friendly, in-sphere, neutral, opposed, that sort of stuff. And these were fundamentally not important for your genuine relationship to a nation. They only existed when it comes to how grand powers are influencing a smaller power. So, for example, Austria would have Bavaria in its sphere, and Prussia might be friendly. Does that mean anything? No. Prussia could declare war against Bavaria at any point. It doesn't matter at all. And then next to this opinion, you also had relations, which were the genuine bilateral relations that countries had. So for example, if you had an opinion over +100 in Victoria 2, you couldn't justify a war goal. If you had an opinion of anything, you can still declare war once you have a war goal, but you can't justify one, right? And this is fundamental, because basically these two systems were disjointed, they were completely disconnected. One only did great power stuff and the other did genuine diplomacy stuff, and now this is sort of merged together. You will see this here in a second, because based on your relationship level, which goes from -100 to +100, you can get certain levels: warm, amiable, cordial, neutral, poor, cold, and hostile. You can already see right here that they evidently merged these systems and made it so that, yes, of course, they are coherent with one another. They are standing not in opposition, but rather in complete understanding. If you have a positive relationship with somebody, then their opinion will be highly positive of you. We can see this reflected here. Great Britain feels towards us hostile, then the USA are cordial, Austria is cordial, the rest is cold or neutral. And you can also see that the one with the golden frame here are great powers, whereas the ones with a silver frame are only major powers. For example, the East India Company, which would likely be a great power, but can't be, because as we learned last Dev Diary, you need to be independent to actually be a great power. So basically, they merged these two things, how great powers view you, what's going on, and put these all into relations. I personally find this to be very, very positive. The way it was in Victoria 2 was tiresome, confusing, incoherent, disjointed. Because these two things, opinion and relation, did completely different things and had nothing to do with one another. So, yeah, fundamentally, I do think actually that relation slightly increased how quickly you could increase the opinion of a country of you, but it really was it didn't matter. Let's just phrase it like this. So I personally find this to be a very positive change. Now, all of these have an impact on the AI's decision making in terms of which diplomatic proposals it will accept, which side it will want to join in diplomatic plays, and so on. But besides that, there are also limitations on what actions you can take against another country based on your mutual relations. So basically, they are saying there will be restrictions. If you have a very good relationship with somebody, you can't just declare war against them. It doesn't make any sense, because your government, your country, and their government and country view each other positively. Now, if you were to worsen that relationship, obviously you could start doing things, but fundamentally, this is significantly better and more coherent, in my opinion, than what we had in Victoria 2. I'm very excited for this one, I will tell you outright. For example, a relations level of cordial or above acts as a non-aggression pact. It isn't possible to start most diplomatic plays against the country with which you have that relation level without first acting to reduce said relations. On the flip side, signing and maintaining a customs union with a country requires you to be at or above cordial relations, and there are other actions that cannot be taken unless relations are at other certain negative or positive thresholds. This, frankly, makes a lot of sense. If you want to form a customs union with somebody that isn't your vassal, you have to convince them. You have to bring them into a cordial position. This will also make it so, and this is very, very positive for me, because it should make single player basically much more fun. It should make it so that you're looking at a country's relationship with yourself, and that country can now evaluate what you can do and what you might want to do. For example, if you have a positive relationship, then yes, first and foremost, the AI will recognize they can't declare war against me. It's all good. I don't need to have my troops there. I don't need to plan against them, and so on and so forth. But if at any point you start to, damage the relations between them and you, the AI basically gets a warning that says, hey, this player will try to screw with you. You need to be prepared, you need to check something, whatever you can to make this war that potentially might be coming a success. And I think that is a good step. It also, of course, matters for multiplayer purposes, where you actually need to maintain a relationship with a country other than just being like, hey, behind your back, Nobody knows Prussia and Japan are best friends, but let's just do it. Can't do that anymore. You need good relationships to actually do something. I think this is a good step all around in single player and in multiplayer. Now, how do you raise and lower relations? The primary way is through the improve relations and damage relations ongoing diplomatic action. More on those next week, but there's many other ways in which relations can be increased or decreased, including various events, diplomatic incidents, see the section of Infamy below, and the expel diplomats' diplomatic actions, which we will also go over in detail next week, which is a way in which one country can act to prevent another country from cozying up to them relations-wise, though at the cost of gaining infamy. Now, if you played Victoria 2, then you will know expel diplomats. You will know basically stopping other countries from liking you, and you will know increase relations or increase opinion. Now it is only improve and damage relations, but it's the same thing, and basically expelling diplomats, of course, I assume that's the same thing. You will no longer be able to increase relations, making it so that you're in a position where, well, you can't actually add a country into your sphere of influence and into your sphere of being liked. So yeah, basically, as I said earlier, they merged these two systems, and I basically think it's for the better. Now, what do we have here? We're looking at France. France has very bad relationships with Great Britain, pretty bad relationships with everybody else, except these minors all around, right? Good relationships with Sardinia-Piedmont, which is of course historical, and then good relationships with Austria. However, relations between France and Austria are cordial, +4. Ongoing efforts to damage relations are at 91% progress, +1% per day, and will result in mutual relations changing by -1 on the 10th of September 1837. Damage relations, +1% progress from Austria each day towards decreasing relations. Basically, Austria created a diplomatic envoy here that makes it so that the relationship will deteriorate, it will go down, it will grow a bit colder, and so on. These efforts can damage relations by up to -5. I read that and said, hey, -5 on a scale between +100 and -100 seems very low. But honestly, balancing is something that I'm not very concerned with right now. I think that they have to do this as they go and as they explore these mechanics. Either way, clearly Austria is trying to worsen relationships with France, maybe because France is cozying up to Sardinia-Piedmont, and then Austria of course would like supremacy over the rest of North Italy as well. What is quite interesting to me actually, I just looked it over, is that it reads cordial +4. Right? But we learned earlier that cordial is between 20 and 49 opinion. I have to assume that +4, so cordial is 20, and then +4 might mean 24 in total relations. But honestly, I'm not entirely certain about the UI there. Right, you see that as well, cordial +4? I would assume that it basically means cordial has this base value of 20 and then +4, or it means something else. Honestly, I'm not entirely certain. That is something that isn't explained in this dev diary, and honestly, fair enough. It is what it is, right? Oh yeah, look at that, the French colonies in Algeria right there. Honestly, this map is nice, except for this stuff. So, again, I want to point this out. These were states in Victoria 2 as well. This was one state. This was just Saxony. This was Hesse, or Hesse-Nassau. I can't actually remember what exactly it was called. So, they didn't really lose any granularity there, but certainly the small princedoms here, the Thuringian princedoms, no longer exist. Not sure how to feel about it. Nobody played those. They're not viable. They don't do anything, but it just looks nicer, right? Just looks nicer with them actually on the map, with that sort of granularity right there. Either way, let's move on. This covers relations. Let's do Infamy. This is a system that we have previously talked about a little under the name of threat, implying that it works similar to aggressive expansion in Europa Universalis, but it is actually something that we have since redesigned following tester feedback, as the very localized effects of threat and aggressive expansion did not feel appropriate to the far more globalized Victorian era. The result is something that could be described as a hybrid between older Infamy, or Bad Boy, systems and the newer, more localized systems. This is a big topic. Threat, on a basic level, basically stated, if you are active somewhere, and if you are active there and somebody else has interests, and you do something against their interests, this will harm your relationship. That is what threat looked like, right? It looked like a direct, basically, impact of -X to your opinion between you and them. No longer the case. Or, well, relation, I should say. No longer the case, now it is Infamy. And Infamy does come with a double-prong attack. It comes basically in on a global and a local level. We're going to see that in a second. The result is something that could be described as a hybrid. Oh, we already did that. In Victoria 3, a country has an Infamy value that starts at 0 and can increase to, well, anything, as there's no upper cap on it. As a country's Infamy increases, other countries will become more wary, resulting in various diplomatic penalties for the infamous country. If Infamy exceeds the pariah threshold, which is currently set to 100. In Victoria 2 it was 25. The country becomes a potential target for a special contained threat diplomatic play, where the great powers step in to restore order. Infamy decays slowly over time, and its rate of decay can be increased if the country has a large amount of unallocated influence capacity, representing that capacity being put to use, trying to salvage the country's global reputation instead. So, to sum it up, Infamy is a value that you accrue by doing aggressive things, by causing diplomatic incidents, by, upending basically the old order. This makes sense, and this is so good so far. Let's take a look at the screenshot, because we're going to get to the local reputation that is also intertwined with Infamy in a second. This is an interesting screen. First of all, I'm a big fan of all these map modes. I think show attitude, show relation, show Infamy, I think that is nice. Maybe, if they're only here, I don't know whether I would be happy. I would rather have them as individual map modes as well, but let's put that aside for the moment. You can see the Infamy is infamous. They have 33. It decays by -0.12 per week, and the base decay is -5 per year, plus 25% from diplomatic mitigation. I assume that basically that means that with their capacity, they went out of their way to say, hey, we're not that evil. We may be Bolivia. Looking around, I'm not sure. I don't think they did they conquer this? Does Brazil go to like here? I don't know. But I will tell you, basically they're trying to mitigate this. What is interesting here, and what is very, very important to me actually, is this one right here. You have attitude and relations, and I really like this. So, the relationship between you and Bolivia, whoever we are, do they say who we are in the screenshot? They do not. Whoever we are, Bolivia and we are basically, we have cold relations. We don't really like one another, but what we can see, and this is really nice, both for AI and the player, is this attitude. The attitude says antagonistic. They very, very clearly are looking at a situation, and we might just be France, by the way. I think we're still looking at France, right? Because they are red. That sounds sensible. Either way, what I really like is the fact that you can see, yes, currently we are cold, but they are antagonistic. They want these relations to be even worse. I like this a lot. This really makes it so that you can see the long-term plan of an AI and of a different player. If they start damaging your relations, I assume it will also say antagonistic, because they are trying to antagonize you. I like that a lot. You can also see improve relations. Now, what I'm not sure about here is, I think that this means this is incoming, because the arrow goes towards it. Actually, now I'm not sure. No, I would say this is incoming. Could also be outcoming. It's a difficult one to say. Basically, this is New Granada, right? No, this is Venezuela, my bad. And the Dutch, they are basically saying we want to improve relations. Then we have a puppet here that is completely unknown to me. If you know this flag, do let me know. And then we have a rivalry that appears to be outgoing towards France. We don't like France, we're Bolivia, and clearly, as you can see, antagonistic. So there you go. I like this. This really goes quite far when it comes to showing you how somebody feels and how they want to feel in the future going forward. And then this one again, ooh, rivalries? Interesting, interesting. Actual rivalries forming, huh? I wonder how that behaves, but I'm very looking forward to the dev diaries that cover that, of course. Now let's move on. The key difference between Victoria 3 and its predecessor here is the diplomatic incident mechanic tied to infamy. In the vast majority of cases, any action a country takes, for example demanding land in a diplomatic play, or violating a neutral country's sovereignty during war. Yo, does that mean you don't have to declare war to march into Belgium? You can just sort of do it? Oh, that's actually cool. That increases infamy will also create a diplomatic incident localized at a particular strategic region. More on that below on the map. For example, starting a diplomatic play to demand a colony in West Africa will result in a diplomatic incident occurring there. Whenever a diplomatic incident happens, the country that caused it immediately suffers a penalty to their relations with all countries that have an interest in the region, with the amount of relations lost based on the amount of infamy attached to the incident in question. Infamy in itself should be understood as a measure of how concerned the great powers are about a country, and as such, a country rank has an effect on how much infamy a country gets when it commits to a diplomatic transgression against another. Generally speaking, the lower the rank of the two countries involved, the less infamy will be generated, as the great powers care a lot more about actions taken by and against other great powers than they do over two minor powers being engaged in a local squabble. So, what do we have here? Infamy on a design point of view basically exists to rate how difficult, or rather, how negatively certain great powers may feel about you. Obviously, the containment, so the restore order CB that we talked about above, is exactly what this results into. If you behave absolutely negatively, then at some point people will want to restore order and say, we need to bring this all back to where it was. Napoleon, right? That sort of example right there. But at the same time, infamy also acts negatively towards anybody that has an interest in the region that you are active in. So wherever you acquire the infamy, that is also where countries that have an interest in it will then be unhappy with you. You can see it right here with the Sikh Empire, so that would be in, I believe, northern India, right? The northern sub-Indian continent right there. Initiate war goals. Sikh Empire conquers the state of South Bengal from East India Company, demanding this will result in a diplomatic incident in North India, giving 62.5 infamy to Sikh Empire and reducing their relations with 18 countries. 18 countries! Why is that? Because there are so many countries that are in this region that are against you, that have different interests, that don't want the Sikh Empire to conquer everything, right? That sort of thing. Very interesting, very fascinating. I personally really like this, where you have this as a great power scale. Obviously, the infamy in itself costs something. The infamy makes it so that you have negative diplomatic modifiers, although they don't really explain what those modifiers are. I hope that they do that in the future. But I also don't think that these modifiers are necessarily that important, because that is day-to-day politics. You're looking at something where it is relevant if you do balancing, but it isn't really relevant for the base design idea. The base design idea that is very important to be pointed out here is the fact that the developers understand that there are a global and a local impact of any given action that you take, and then an impact that comes from being or going against a great power and from being or going against a local power. All those have an influence on how countries see you, both on the local, on the regional level, but also on the global scale. And I think, again, what the actual modifiers are, we can't really tell. We see 62.5 infamy, and then separately, it also appears to be reducing their relations with 18 countries. What that infamy actually does, outside of potentially giving you a restore order CB against you, we can't say. But I will tell you that this is a system that understands it. Of course, Threat was a very interesting proposal. We didn't really learn too much about it. We just saw it in a couple of screenshots. But I will say, this system, to me, says that they really understand what is important in Victoria 3 and in diplomacy of this Victorian era. And I do think that if they balance this right, we have a system that really makes it interesting, because you can ravage the local area that you have if no actual great power is interested in it, and otherwise you may have trouble, because the world police just arrived and Great Britain says, well, sick empire, what about you just become integrated into the British Raj, which did happen in, I believe, 1849 to the sick empire in reality. Now, ultimately, what this means is that Infamy doesn't just have a global effect, and where you're accruing it matters. If you keep taking actions that destabilize a particular strategic region, you can expect to quickly become very unpopular with both the locals and any outside power that have taken interest in it. By now, I've said the word interest a whole bunch of times, so it is probably time to finally explain what they are. To do that, though, I first have to explain the concept of strategic regions. A strategic region is a large, predetermined geographic area consisting of a number of state regions, with the 715 state regions of the current internal build divided into a total of 49 strategic regions. Here we have the European regions. Let's take a look at this, right? We have the Rhine Basin, North France, South France, Iberia as a whole, Italy as a whole, Balkans, Anatolia, Caucasus, South Russia, Poland. South Russia looks odd, but I will say again, it's more a strategic region than it is anything else meaningful. You're never going to see this on the map outside of declaring your interests and utilizing your interests and so on and so forth. Interesting that the Rhine Basin, so Germany here to a degree, is split, because if you look at the rest, this is basically the Deutscher Bund, right? Not this. Forget the Swiss being in this, but this is basically the Deutscher Bund, except this, right? Maybe France's natural borders are the reason for this, so that the interest of France actually plays a big role here, because of course, until, you know, the German Empire was founded, and I mean, even during and after World War I, the Rhine Basin was a big topic for France, so being involved here, making this into one big topic is, I think, really nice. Let's just play this through, right? Let's say Great Britain declares that Belgium is in their interest, they want to protect it, don't do anything against Belgium. This gives them a reason to have an interest in the Rhine Basin. Then you have a war against Germany and between France and Germany. Hey, the British may feel strongly about this, because they don't want this region to be destabilized, because they have an interest in Belgium. I generally like this. Again, this is all work in progress at the end of the day. How it really plays out is very difficult to say, but no, I like the basis. You can see, however, that most of this does follow the actual state regions, so the proper states, the state regions, so not just the states as they are. You can see it right here. This is, for example, Pomerania. This is Brandenburg, right? Yeah, it's cut perfectly. So these all follow state region borders. Of course, none of that is changed. And state regions are also currently permanent as they are in the game. They did mention they may want to change that, but at the very least, states should be splittable so that, you know, you could split this. Either way, interesting concept. Now let's take a look at declaring interests. Interests is, put simply, a mechanic that determines whether or not a country has a stake in a particular strategic region and plays into numerous different mechanics such as diplomatic plays, colonization, and the aforementioned diplomatic incidents. A country can gain an interest in a region in one of two ways, either automatically by having a geographical presence there, so, for example, Prussia has an interest in the Rhine Basin because they hold land in the Rhine Basin. Owning land or controlling subject nations in the region, or by using a declared interest. A declared interest is a country quite simply saying that, regardless of their lack of geographic presence, a strategic region is still of importance to them, perhaps because they plan to colonize it, or because they want to prevent a hated rival from expanding into it. A country can declare an interest in any region that is either adjacent to a region, where they already have an interest, or which they can reach through the support of their naval supply network. More on that later. Oh my god, wait a minute, this is actually really interesting. Naval supply network, huh? So these are trade routes, at least the way I understand it. Wait, let me go up. We saw the other image earlier. Look at this, right? Do these golden dots denominate that this is in the reach of the French supply network? Look at that. Look at this. Over here, they don't have reach. They have reach down there. No reach there. I think that is what that is, right? What do you think? I think this actually denotes where France has a supply network. So, like this, right? And then over there. Interesting. Who knows whether that is it, but very interesting. Okay, okay. I like that. I really do like that. Either way, whether that is that, it doesn't really matter. But basically, you have you need to have naval access to the regions that you declare interest in. Otherwise, who would take your interest seriously, right? That makes a lot of sense. Let's take a look at this. Right, either adjacent or naval supply network. The number of declared interests that is available to a country depends on their rank. A great power can choose to have its fingers in a great many pies, while an insignificant power is limited to acting only in regions where they already have land. Ah, right. So insignificant power, very small, of course. Krakow, for example, is involved in Poland, but that's it. But then you have, for example, Great Britain, can have many, many areas. And then you would have a major power, like, for example, I believe the Kingdom of Two Sicilies is a major power. They could have one if they can reach it just via the sea. Alright, interesting. I like that. That's a really good one. And here we can see somebody declare interest for the region of Persia. Makes sense, yeah. Persia was a hot button issue. Afghanistan, of course, in particular as well, in this area. Very, very cool. I like that. Honestly, this declaration is nice, and I think this implies that you basically can reach it via this naval route. It is marked in a particular way. You see this? That it's blue here. It's not the same. This is gray, then we have golden if we go to the other one. Honestly, yeah, I'm really, really interested in naval supply routes because we already know that migration will go through the naval supply routes, that plays a role there, and apparently also colony supply and, you know, market access and so forth and so whatnot. Very, very cool. I would very much like them to dive into that, but of course, currently we are still at the beginning of the diplomacy dev diaries. Here we have Trucial States, huh? Interesting. Anybody know something about the Trucial States? This is the sick empire, by the way. I recognize this. Interests do not provide any inherent benefit to a country besides the ability to throw their weight around in a strategic region. It can actually be a bit of a double-edged sword in that a country with interests all over the world may get dragged into a lot of local conflicts. Ultimately, interests are our attempt to simulate such historical occurrences, I can't read, as why certain parts of the world simply got a lot more attention from the great powers than others at particular points during the century that Victoria 3 covers, and to make nations act and care about things in a way that makes sense according to their national self-interest. Really, really cool. I talked about this earlier, that relations and the relationship status and then what the attitude is. This will tell the AI and the player what a country is bound to do, right? That is basically what it explains, and that is very cool. This one does the same thing. You, as the player, and the AI both can understand what one another wants to do based on the strategic interests. Hey, you know, if France wants to be your friend and, I don't know, you are Spain, you have an interest in South America, France might stay away from that because they say, I don't want to mess with Iberia, or rather, I don't want to mess with Spain because Spain is my ally. Really, really cool. Doesn't really happen in other games. Look at Imperator Rome, where you can be best friends with Rome, but they will just conquer everything, even if it's clearly something that should be yours, right? So this is a good step. I think it should make it visible and easier for the AI what is going on, make the player a bit more predictable, and make it so that the AI can actually counter you. Now, in multiplayer, of course, this also plays a role, because if you declare an interest, you declared an interest. I think these are great steps forward. I personally am a big fan of what we have seen with relations. I think the incoherent mess that were Victoria 2, you know, separated opinions and relations is gone, and that is good. Instead, we have emerged a better approach. I very much welcome this. I would also say that I think Infamy is a good rework. You know, they didn't say anything. In Victoria 2, for example, Infamy also gives you consciousness. They didn't say anything here. It was a purely external measure that they introduced here. I don't think that this will be like Victoria 2. Again, in Victoria 2, it did give you consciousness. Either way, I am a big fan of reworked Infamy. It is no longer this, you know, hey, 25 bad boy points and you're basically going to prison because everybody's going to declare war on you to an insane degree. Instead, you have more to play around with, and it is still, although it is global, on a bit of a scale where, hey, if somebody doesn't have an interest, they likely won't really care about you doing something because the immediate opinion decrease, or rather relation decrease, won't really occur. Last but not least, of course, interests, I think also very, very good step forward, making it so that you and the AI have to declare what is going on, and you have to choose where you want to be committed, where you want to be active. If you already hold land here, that is basically a free strategic interest region, but if you don't, then you have to extend your energy somewhere, right? And in this case, 0 out of 1. Maybe it's France, I'm not sure. But I really like this approach. I think that is very, very well done. Also, there's a gigantic... Just like, is this the entire region? No way, right? That's crazy. Maybe, actually. Man, I mean, looking at this... Oh, no, look at this. I don't know why the color... Why? Oh! Does this just mean everything that is green is a valid region? That's exactly what it means, isn't it? Because look at this. We can clearly see Anatolia as separate. Confusing map mode, though. You would think that one is like all of it, right? But no, look at this. These are the regions. Persia is clearly separate. Anatolia is separate. Then we have a... What is this Circassia? I can't remember. But either way, Caucasus is separate, right? Very cool. I personally, I like these, yeah. This map mode, again, if they colored these slightly different so that I can tell these are different regions, I guess I can just tell by name, but these are also the country names, so I don't think that is valid. Honestly, I'm not sure. I hope you know where I'm going with that last video section rambling here. But no matter what the strategic regions turn out to look like, I like the approach of saying you need to focus on something, and you declaring an interest, much like it was in the Victorian era, is not a secret. People know where you're going, where you want to go, and whether you're going to be successful in that, and whether they want to jump in and basically go against you there. I like that a lot, and let me know what you think in the comments about these systems that we had here today. I will read them all as always, and yeah, I'll see you later. Alligator.